plays a startling role in this whole business of the Word of God, and especially through the gospel stories. And as you look at his life, if you're like I am, you have a strong identification with him, because much of what you see him doing and the way you see him acting out and the kinds of things you see spilling from him, if you're like I am, again, you identify with those things and say, hey, that's like me. That's the way I am. In fact, it's a little bit embarrassing, to tell you the truth, because I see way too much of myself in the life of Peter, and I identify with the kinds of things he got into and the kinds of reactions he had. You see him, for instance, in great events. There isn't too much about him actually in the beginning section of Matthew. He's kind of in the background, as it were. He's there, of course, in the choosing of the disciples and that sort of thing, but he doesn't really have a prominent role. But as you move into the middle section of Matthew, you begin to see that he is really strong, man. Peter is right at the front lines. He's the head of the group. He's obviously the leader of the disciple group, and there's the inner core, Peter, James, and John, and Peter's leading the pack. So the guy who is the head disciple, so to speak, and ends up being the spokesman for most of the occasions, is none other than this man by the name of Peter. And you see him in occasions like walking on the water. That was a significant scene, you know. And don't underestimate the dynamic of what was going and what he actually got involved in. Jesus, of course, had sent them over, told them to go to cross the Sea of Galilee, which was something like 5, I guess, to 7 miles, something like that, depending on where you were in the sea, but about 5 miles across. They got about 2.5 miles out and stopped dead in the center. Couldn't go any further. The reason? Storm had come up, which was not unusual for that day. And Peter, of course, was an experienced fisherman, along with the other guys, and they were used to this knowing when a storm was going to come. And they'd been through lots of storms, and they didn't get scared of anything. They'd gone through this stuff before, no big deal. Except this storm was so fierce, the winds just came in, and there were 8-10-foot waves. You know, they were just spilling over the boat, filling the boat up, and of course the boat was going to sink. And then worse than that, it got to be the night hour, so it was pitch dark, and they're bailing water out of this thing like mad, trying to keep the boat afloat, not interested in going anyplace. Hey, they couldn't do that. These waves, it was just overwhelming. They're fighting for their very lives, scared to death. And in the midst of all of that, of course, they look up, and in the moonlight, as the storm clouds part just enough to let the moonlight through, whoa, there is this ghostly figure jumping, the scripture says, leaping from one storm wave to another. The top of this storm wave coming over to another one, and then over to another one, and he's leaping around out there, and they're scared to death, thinking, of course, that it's a ghost. And of course, Jesus yells at them above the storm waves and the noise of the storm, and they find out it's him. And Peter immediately says, well, if it's really you, I want to come out there and do that too. Looks like fun. So Jesus said, come on down, Peter. So Peter steps over the side of the boat. Can you imagine this? And just, hey, what a powerful guy. I mean, this is phenomenal. And I would like to identify with him at that moment, of course, and say the courage of the man. Whoa, he's so strong. Wow, doing what nobody else will do. Whoa, moving at the command of Jesus. Good for you, Peter. So he steps out, and hey, only goes a few feet, down he goes. And of course, the obvious interpretation is that he got all wrapped up in the storm waves, got his eyes off of Jesus, and down he went. How many times I've done that? Great courage started out. Before I got down I went. Hey, got to looking at the circumstances, got to looking at what I had done, got to rethinking about the stand I'd taken and what was actually happening, and whoa, got scared to death. Got my eyes off of Jesus and what he'd called me to do. See, so easy to do. I identify with Peter. I identify with Peter. I identify with Peter in his denial. Hey, cursing and damning that he never knew Jesus because one little maid servant is pointing the finger at him. Hey, I've been there, done that, man. Hey, to my great shame, I have played that role far too often and haven't stood when I should and hadn't been what I ought to have been when God was counting on me. God forgive me. See, I identify with Peter. I identify with Peter, of course, in this great scene here. Way too much do I identify with him. Oh. Hey, Jesus is giving overwhelming truth as you know, in chapter 16 of Matthew. He's giving this overwhelming truth. He's talking to them about the content of His Messiahship, how He is a bleeding, suffering, dying Messiah, and how the only chance we've got to winning our world, the only chance for redemption is this cross and its style, and we must join Him, pour our lives out, give ourselves up to Him. Man, I identify with that. I want to be a part of that. And Peter wanted to be in the will of Jesus as well. But then I identify with Peter as he took Jesus aside and he literally rebuked. Can you imagine the gall of the man? Can you imagine, Peter, what are you doing? Jesus is the Master. Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is the Lord of Lords and King of Kings, man. Jesus is the one who's born of a virgin. Man, who are you, Peter? What kind of magnificent training have you had? Jesus has had the training of the mind of the Father, and you just stumble around in the dark with some rabbis. Good night, Peter. What are you doing? You're in your arrogance, acting like you know everything, coming right up to Jesus saying, "Hey, Jesus, don't talk like that. I know better than you do. I'm smarter." Now listen, let me give you some advice here, Lord Christ. Do you identify with that? Man, I identify with that. To my great shame, how many times I've given Christ advice. My prayer life, oh, God forgive me. My prayer life has been a scene of harassing God with what I know and what I think He ought to do and how He ought to do it. And this is the way it ought to be done, God. After all, I live down here and I know this scene pretty well. And I know these people involved, and I know what his motive was, and I know what she meant, and I know how that happened, and I know what you ought to zap that guy there. And of course you ought to heal this guy, he's a good guy. But that guy there you ought to nail this guy, and Jesus, you ought to straighten that bird out. And see, I've been filled with my own, like, I know what's going on, how it ought to be done, and what He ought to do. And Jesus, my prayer life has been demanding Jesus. See, I see my prayer life in verse 22 of Matthew chapter 16. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Now listen, God, you're not acting quite like you ought to act here, and I don't know what the holdup is, God, but hey, let's hop to it, Lord. Come on, come on, come on. We haven't got time for this. After all, we got to get things on the move. Here's how you ought to do it. And I've been rebuked him. Come on, God. Hey, hey, hey. God forgive me. See, I identify with Peter. I've seen way too much of that in my life and in my heart. So all of that's so characteristic of me. Now I wish that it went away. I wish that it didn't keep coming, but whoa, you get into chapter 17, and you remember chapter 16 is the consideration of the cross style as he lays this whole idea out, that the content of his messiahship is a bleeding, suffering, dying Messiah, and that indeed he's going to a cross. And of course, as he's laid that out, they rebuked him, and Peter is all involved in the middle of that. Then as you come into chapter 17, it's the confirmation of the cross style. And that what he's doing is he's giving a whole series of things that literally confirm that indeed Jesus is telling them the truth, and He is a bleeding, suffering, dying Messiah, and that they ought to pay attention to what He's got to say to them. And the first scene, of course, is the Mount of Transfiguration, which we are dealing with. It goes from verse 1 down through verse 8. And we want to spend some time again reading it. Let's go to verse 1 and read down through it. Now after 6 days, Jesus took Peter. There he is again. Peter, James, and John, his brother, led them up on a high mountain by themselves, and he was transfigured before their very eyes, before them. His face shone like the sun. His clothes became as white as the light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with him. Remember that? Then Peter, there he is again. Peter answered and said to Jesus, Lord, it's good for us to be here. If you wish, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. While Peter, there he is again, was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them. And suddenly a voice came out of the cloud saying, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear him. And when the disciples heard it, they fell on their faces and were greatly afraid. And Jesus came and touched them and said, Arise and do not be afraid. When they had lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. Man, I love that. Well, Peter's certainly in the limelight, isn't he? Hey, Jesus has reached out, grabbed a hold of Peter, along with James and John, and dragged them off to the mountain. He went there to pray. And when he went to prayer, asking God the Father to bring revelation on this issue of the content of His Messiahship, suddenly He is transfigured right before their very eyes. And we were giving you an outline, and we want to continue with that outline. You note, first of all, in verse 3, there was the direct communication. The direct communication. Jesus is the focal point of all history. That Moses and Elijah have come down, all the Old Testament law, all the Old Testament prophets. So here's all the Old Testament history, literally focusing in on and wrapping its arm around Jesus and saying, let's talk about only one thing. And they talked about His decease, His cross, according to Luke, which He should accomplish in Jerusalem. So the whole discussion is, you're the only chance we've got. Here's what we've been pointing to. This is the whole deal, Jesus. This is the only way it can go down. You've got to go to a cross. Oh, Jesus, don't let the disciples talk you out of it. Go to a cross. So this moment, this style of the cross, this bleeding, suffering, dying Christ is the focal point of all history. Every lamb that was sacrificed told them that. Every time they slit a lamb's throat and his blood was shed for their sins, man, hey, it was yelling out at them, hey, here's what's going down. This is the style of the kingdom. Here's what it's all about, boys. And so Jesus is simply telling them, hey guys, I'm a bleeding, suffering, dying Messiah. Moses and Elijah have now come down and they have verified. The Old Testament has verified. It is the truth, and it's been confirmed by the Old Testament. And then we went into the second issue. Not only is there the direct communication, Jesus is the focal point of all history, but there is the divine confirmation. Jesus is the focal point of all the dreams of God. And we started in our last class session by talking to you about, number one, the interruption. Peter, of course, is talk, 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 talk. He's been doing that for 6 solid days. That's what the whole argument was at the end of chapter 16. Jesus is giving them new information. Peter's talk, 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 talk. See, he's not listening. He's talk, 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 talk. His mind is calculating what he can say next to give rebuttal to Jesus. Talk, 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 talk. See, Peter's really into arguing. Talk, 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 talk. His whole life is filled with talk, 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 talk. And of course now here he is at the Mount of Transfiguration. Moses and Elijah. Hey, have you ever seen anything like it? Moses and Elijah. Hey, Peter had not either. Moses and Elijah, the heavenly being, literally came down and carried on a conversation with Jesus. And you'd think Peter would be flat on his face, brother, flat on his face, saying, whoa, with his mouth shut, saying, man, I want to listen to this. What do they got to say? What are they talking about? What's the conversation on? But no, Peter's talk, 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 talk. He gets up and he literally interrupts. Can you imagine it? He interrupts the conversation between Jesus, Moses, and Elijah. And what he has to say is so dumb. Talk, 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 talk. Lord, it's good for us to be here. Verse 4, he says, Lord, it's good for us to be here. If you wish, let us make here 3 tabernacles. One for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. Talk, 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 talk. Man, oh man. Do you identify with that? I identify with that. Talk, 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 talk. We talked last class period about my prayer life. Talk, 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 talk. Hey, my ministry. Talk, 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 talk. My evangelism. Talk, 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 talk. I define everything in terms of my talk, 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 talk. Hey, my life is filled with talk, 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 talk. It's the activity of talk, 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 man. Instead of falling on my face and being an instrument through which God could move, listening, letting my lips only part when He wants to speak something through me. I'm engaged, brother. Talk, 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 talk. Hey, identify with Peter. And the same thing that was going on when he took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him is now going on in a different form, maybe with a different tone, but still it's the talk, talk, talk. I'm not listening. Talk, 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 talk. Hey, I'll not hear you. Talk, 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 talk. And on it goes. So you have the divine interruption, because what takes place is that in verse 5, while Peter was still talk, 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 behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them. And suddenly the voice of God came out of the cloud saying, this is my beloved Son, in whom I well please. Shut up, Peter, and listen to him. Hey, Peter, clue in. Come on, boy. Hey, clue in. Listen, boy. Listen. Listen. Listen to the truth. He's telling you the truth. Listen to it. Instead of talk, 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 talk. So God literally divinely interrupts Peter's conversation. But then how else could he talk to Peter if he didn't interrupt? How else could he talk to us if he didn't interrupt us? If somehow he didn't allow things to come to our lives and put us flat on our back, that just button our lip, just sew our mouths shut, man. Just so astound us, just startle us, just pressure us until he interrupts our lives. Oh God, continue to interrupt our lives until we hear the fullness of your truth. Continue, continue. So there's the divine interruption taking place. Now, in this passage, as you see it unfolding, there's not only the divine interruption, there is the divine explanation. And I know, of course, that you have seen that in verse 5. We've already read it, but look at it again. While he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and suddenly a voice came out of the cloud saying, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear him. And you have the divine explanation. See, if we can ever get into the position of listening, if we can ever get into the position where our mouth is dead shut, man, and we're just sitting with the whole total absolute focus on him and him alone, so that he then will speak to us, we will receive the divine explanation, and we will know God will communicate to us. You can count on it. Oh, if we could just come to the place of listening, the divine explanation would be told. Hey, here it's coming, and he isn't listening. Hey, oh, the startlingness of God literally interrupting him in the middle of his brilliant speech. God just interrupts him and gives the divine explanation, which is what the world is interested in hearing. There's a lesson in that, isn't there? See, the world is not interested in hearing my talk, 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 talk. Hey, this is my opinion. You think anybody cares? Nobody cares about one more opinion among the millions of opinions that have already been offered. And I'm just one more voice in the talk, 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 talk. But oh, if God could speak, if God could explain, I'd really be interested in that. See, this guy comes on Sunday morning, brother. He comes and sits in your service. You're going to do the preaching. He comes and sits. You think he's interested in hearing the latest idea you've come up with? You think he's interested in hearing your advice on the scene? You think he's interested in knowing what happened in your life that day? Do you think he's interested in the cute jokes you can tell? He's not interested in that at all. You know why he drug himself out of bed, put clothes on his back, made his way down to hear to be in your service? He came because he thought, maybe, just maybe, God will break through and I can hear from a divine God. I'm not interested in your opinion. I'm not interested in your talk. What I'm interested in, oh God, could you give a divine explanation? Could you speak? So you see, when we preach, we must be the voice of God. See, when we speak, man, it must be God speaking. We must be so tight with him. We must be so filled with him that our words are not our words. They're his words, because he's doing the speaking through us. And the divine explanation is coming through loud and clear. The grammar structure in this divine explanation is just startling. And I know I will not be able to adequately explain it to you. Holy Spirit is going to have to bring it to our minds and our hearts and communicate it to us in a real way. But the Greek grammar structure Now, we're constantly saying this, but you remember that when you look at verse 5 and you read the words, you're not reading the words that Matthew wrote. He didn't write those words, and certainly Jesus, the Father, did not speak those words to Jesus. Those are not the words, because you see, Matthew did not know English, and so that is not what he wrote. What you have is a translation. Now, at best, whatever translation you have, I don't care. At best, it is a translation. You have a translation of what was originally written and originally spoken. And Matthew, of course, wrote in Greek. So when you come to the Greek language and you look at it in verse 5, and you look at this statement, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear him." Now that's a powerful statement in the Greek. And the grammar structure, the verb form of what is going on in that statement is in what is called the aorist tense. Now, the aorist tense, we have nothing like it in the English language. And you can research all of this and investigate and find out more information than I can give you now. But the aorist tense is a special tense that's in the Greek, but we have nothing like it in the English. When we bring it into the English translation, normally we translate it past tense in an attempt to get at what they were. And normally that pretty well covers where I said, it's no big deal, and we just flow through it and kind of ride with that. The aorist tense. And the aorist tense is really an interesting investigation. You see, when the Greek language started, they had no tense but the aorist tense. In other words, everything, if you can imagine, everything they said was in this one thing, aorist. It was virtually no tense. So the aorist tense is virtually a no tense. If that makes any sense to you. Then they begin to add, for instance, they begin to add present tense. So instead of just speaking in the aorist, they begin to speak in, oh, it's happening right now. Then they begin to speak in past tense, which means instead of it just being an aorist tense, it's happening right now, or it happened in the past. And then they begin to speak in future tense, which meant, oh, it's happening right now, happened in the past, oh, it happened in the future. And so this aorist tense was kind of the beginning of the whole thing. And the idea of the aorist is punctiliar in action. In other words, it often has the sense of a completion, that the total focus is on the event or the action itself. For instance, well pleased. God is well pleased, in whom I am well pleased. Talking about God the Father pleased with Jesus. And the focus would be on the action of that He is totally, absolutely well pleased. And it's not about past, and it's not about future, and it's not about present. It's about the punctiliar action. The focus is on the action of God the Father literally being well pleased with the Son. And it has the idea often of completed action. In other words, it is a completed deal. It's all wrapped up in a complete package of its own. That it is a completed thing, that the Father is pleased with His Son, and that's not up for suspicion. I don't know whether I'm going to be pleased in the future or not. No, this is completed. He is well pleased. It's like the conclusion has been reached. It is like, hey, it's all done. It's final. It's a completed kind of action thing. Now, this particular aorist, and there's different kinds, by the way, but in verse 5, I am well pleased. That particular aorist focuses on the idea of history. In other words, they call it a historical aorist. This is a historical aorist, which is really confusing. And I don't want to confuse you, only to highlight an idea, a concept. That the historical aorist means that when exactly was the Father well pleased? Was it at this scene right here? Was it when He was speaking here that, oh yes, Jesus, I've seen you in your transfigured form, and I am well pleased because of that. So you are well pleasing me right now in this present moment at the Mount of Transfiguration? Or is it that Jesus was well pleasing to the Father when he was born of a virgin, that he leaped off of his throne, emptied himself of all that he had as God, and he became a total man, born in the womb of Mary. And it was at that moment that, hey, oh, there it is, Jesus. Man, I'm well pleased, well pleased. Yeah, it's a completed thing at his birth. Or was it at his baptism that God the Father was well pleased? Or was it at the Mount of Transfiguration, or at the Sermon on the Mount? That's when the Father was well pleased. When he was or was it when he was rebuking the Pharisees? Or was it the cross? Or when exactly? Was there another time? See, when was this action completed? So they use the historical aorist to give this sense of an imaginary time, that the idea is that it isn't at the Mount of Transfiguration, it isn't at the baptism of Jesus when the Holy Spirit came, it wasn't at his birth, it was sometime way back there, we don't know when, that this whole action of the Father being pleased was completed. It was a punctiliar action someplace way back, we don't know when. We just make it a historical aorist, so that it's always been. In other words, there really was no point in time. But because there was no point in time, we're kind of, in order to state it, have to make one up. So we have an imaginary point in time when the Father was well pleased and the punctiliar action of the aorist tense takes place. But hey, really the truth of it is, he was always well pleased with the Father. That there never was, he was always well pleased with the Son. That there never was a time that the Father's heart didn't beat in pleasure for the Son. That back before the creation of the world he was pleased, and in the creation of the world as it all spilled through Jesus he was pleased, and in every action of the life of Jesus in creation he was pleased, and everything that spilled out of his hands he was pleased, and all the involvement of Jesus in that creation moment he was pleased, and all through the Old Testament history as the dream of the Messiahship was being shaped and being brought into the fullness of time, he was pleased, and all the way through the 400 years of intertestamental period, he was pleased with the Son. And the Father's heart beat when the Son leaped off of his throne and took on flesh and entered into flesh. And the Father was, oh, so pleased. He was pleased then too. And oh, through the childhood of Jesus, he was pleased. And listen, when Jesus was entering into ministry, he was so pleased. He was applauding every inch of the way. In fact, he said so then as well, didn't he? For as the Holy Spirit came upon Jesus, the voice of the Father spoke out and said, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." Same identical words, man, except he didn't have the "hear him" on the end of it. Hey, it's the same identical words. I'm pleased. See, the Father was pleased then. And do you realize that all through the controversy with Jesus and the Pharisees, the Father was pleased? There was never a moment in time when the Father was not pleased. Every action he did, whoops, wait a minute. Jesus is healing a withered hand on the Sabbath day, and that breaks the Sabbath day law according to the Pharisees. But you know what God the Father is doing? He's applauding, saying, yay, Jesus, go at it. I'm well pleased, man. I'm well pleased. I look back on you there, and I was well pleased with that. You did the right thing, man. Do it again. Keep at it. Yay for you, Jesus. Yay, yay, yay. Hey, and when you see Jesus speaking the words, and a centurion's servant is healed, a Roman pagan centurion, he's not a Jew. The Father's saying, yay, Jesus, I'm well pleased. Hey, you're dead on. Come on. What you're allowing me to do through you in this moment pleases me. It pleases me. I am well pleased. See, there never was a time, eons of eternity, down through every moment of his ministry, down through the cross, down through the resurrection, down through the ascension, it never was a moment when the Father wasn't pleased with the Son. How could the Father be pleased with every activity of ministry? Every single thing that Jesus did, how could the Father be pleased with that? I'm talking about 3 years of ministry. Didn't he blow it one time? Wasn't there one time in a sermon when he wasn't prepared? Wasn't there one miracle where he got a little carried away? Wasn't there one extravagant thing that maybe it'd have been better off if he'd have backed off a little there? Wasn't there one single thing he wasn't pleased with? Not one. He was pleased with everything. You know why? Because everything that was happening through Jesus was the demonstration of, and done through the power of, and instigated by, and sourced by the Father. So the whole life of Jesus was pleasing to the Father. Why? Because it was the Father. It was the Father. See, that's the whole message of the New Testament, man. That what's going on in Jesus is not doing what he's doing because he's God, and the Father's standing back saying, whoa, you did a good one there. Yeah, man, how'd you think up of that? How'd you think that up? Whoa, that was phenomenal. No, it's not that kind of a deal. See, Jesus is a platform upon which the God the Father is acting. Jesus is a glove into which God the Father has jammed his hand. See, Jesus is the instrument that God the Father is used. Jesus is the channel, the conduit through which the divine God is flowing. See, everything that's going on in the life of Jesus is a product of the divine Father. So he's pleasing to the Father because his life is the Father. He's a demonstration of the invisible God himself. He's the visibility of the invisible God because God has come to live within him, and his total life is well pleasing to the Father because the Father is his life. What about us? See, man, that's what I want in my life. See, I got to have that in my life. That's the craving of my soul. That's not the, well, I'd sure like to achieve that sometime, maybe when I get to heaven. No! My burn of my soul is, I got to have that now, man. That's got to be present in my life now. I can't live another moment if that doesn't take place. See, I want no ministry except a ministry that's pleasing to the Father. I want no words to come from my lips except words that are pleasing to the Father. I want no attitude in my system that isn't pleasing to the Father. See, I want every reflection of my face, every movement of my hand, every action of my being. I want my total life to literally be pleasing to the Father. How could you never make a mistake? We're not talking about that. How could you never have a reflection in your voice that wasn't? We're not talking about that. We're talking about my life, my flow, the ministry, everything that's going on in me being pleasing to the Father. Well, it's impossible to always do the right thing. I know that. But this is not about doing. This is about being filled with him until he is doing through you. And what's pleasing to the Father is allowing his Son to live his life through us. So see, this is the action of God coming to display himself upon our lives. This is the action of God literally doing in Jesus in us what he was doing in Jesus, so that the same identical Holy Spirit that filled Jesus is now filling us, and we too become pleasing to the Father. Can you imagine the Son leaning over from the right hand of the Father saying, yay, man, yay, I'm well pleased, boy. Why? Well, because you've let me live through you, and I'm pleased with the action I'm doing in and through you. And he is not well pleased with me because I always do the right thing. Well, I'm always faithful to the church. Well, I've never committed adultery. He's not well pleased based upon the things I've done. He's well pleased because my life has become a flow of his presence to my world. He has been allowed to indwell me, and he captivates my mind and lives in my inner heart and literally begins to flow through my very being. And my life is somehow a demonstration of who he is. So he is well pleased, well pleased. See, that's the dynamic of what's going on in this verse, which of course distinctly applies to us. So the Father's come down, and when wasn't the Son well pleasing to the Father? Never been a time, see, never been a time. So they put it in what is called the historical aorist. Now I want you to look at the strength of these words. The words of the testimony of the Father for the Son. This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. Hear him. Let's analyze those words, the strength of them. This is my beloved Son. You get the possession of that? Oh, sure, you know what the possession of that word. My. The 3-year-old says, this is mine, I will not share it. See, there's real possession in that. This is mine. Oh, you know what the Father is saying? This is my. Hey, I'm buying in, son. Hey, this son of mine belongs to me. Listen, I'm identifying with him. This is ownership in the sense of identification. This is, hey, I'm aligning myself with the Son. I want to tell you, I'm buying into everything that he is. I want to tell you, I'm not holding him at arm's length. This is I'm telling you, hey, that what the Son is doing and what's going on in him and what's happening through him, I'm buying into that 100%. I'm claiming ownership of that. See, I'm claiming ownership of that. Do you see how significant that is? I'm claiming, this is mine. I'm claiming ownership with that. See, I'm identifying with the Son so that I'm telling you that what he's doing and what's happening in his life and what's flowing through him is a part of me, man. I'm buying into it. I'm owning it. I'm aligning my life with it. I'm not saying, well, yeah, if I'd have been there, I'd have probably done a little different. Oh, yeah, I'd have probably said it this way. Well, no, I'm saying that everything he said and everything he did and everything he's acting, I am so well pleased. It's I'm buying into that. The ownership thing is taking place here, and every word and every action and everything he did, I'm owning up to it, man. I'm claiming it as my own. Man, I want that in my life. Can you imagine that happening in your life? Where Jesus is literally coming and saying, hey, everything that's going on in Manly's life, every action, every attitude, every thought, brother, the whole business of ministry, everything he's involved in, it's mine, son, mine. I'm buying into it, brother. Hey, I'm taking ownership of it. It's not, well, I'd have done a little bit different. No, I'm owning it, brother. I'm owning it. Man, I want to be so in tune with Jesus. I want such a reality with him. I want a oneness to take place between me and him until that actually, the expression of my life is his expression. I want him to own it. I want him to have ownership in it. I don't want him to have to come and correct me and say, well, I wish you'd have let me to have done this through you. I want him to say, yes, I own what happened because I was there doing it through you, and you and I are one, and my life is your life, and you are allowing me to live through you, and I'm owning, I'm identifying with, hey, this is my, and there's ownership involved here. Oh, for him to own my life like that. Did you note the next word? This is my beloved. Oh, those words are soothing, aren't they? Beloved. Oh, to hear Jesus say that about you. Beloved. Do you imagine what the Father, what Jesus felt when he heard the Father say, this is my, I'm owning him. I'm owning what's going on in and through him. I'm owning his action, his ministry. I'm owning it all. And he's my beloved, meaning he's the object of my love. I want you to know that the entire focus of my being is on him. I want you to know the Father is saying that there's never a moment in time, there's never a second in the hour that I am not totally, absolutely focusing my love, spilling it all over him, that he is not sensing the undergirding power of my love underneath him, that he is totally girded with the power of my being, because I love him. He's my beloved. He's the object of my love. I don't take a vacation from him. I'm not off someplace. It's not that once in a while I express kindness to him. It's not that sometimes I tell him and pat him on the back and say what a good job. Don't you get it, man? He's the beloved. He's the object. He's the chosen. You know, of course, what happened in an Old Testament. The Israelites picked up on that concept, and they began to express that about themselves. That they were the chosen. They were the beloved. They were the object of God's love. And that they were the ones that God had focused, concentrated His love upon. And of course you come into the New Testament and you know what happens there. Hey, the epistles, the writers of the epistles literally blow that thing wide open. The Apostle Paul does that. He literally blows it wide open and says, hey, what Israel claimed is now ours. And what Israel once said was theirs, we now take. Because we are the true Israel of God. And that what's going on here is we are the beloved. We are the chosen ones. Hey, He has picked us out. We are not some massive race of people. We are not generations of time. We are not numbers on a board. We are not faces in a crowd. Hey, He has selected me, and I am His beloved. I am the object of His love. If my mother were here, she would say something like this in a testimony: I guess I'm just God's favorite. And of course, whenever she'd say that, I'd nudge her and scoot her over and say, hey, you've missed it. I'm the beloved of God. I'm the chosen one of God. I'm God's favorite. See, it's something, isn't it, about the love of God that is so concentrated that when you experience it in your life, you get the feeling that God loves you more than anybody else. Yet I know that isn't true. But He's lavished His love upon me. I'm the beloved, and we've talked about this in another class, but I'm the beloved of God. How could you ever get away from talking about this? I'm the beloved of God. I'm the object of His affection, that He's focused His entire attention on me. And the old-timers were right, man, when they said, hey, if you would have been the only one in the whole world that needed redemption, Jesus would have come for you. Why? Because you were the only one He came for, man. It's as if there was no one else but you. He was so focused on you and so wrapped up in your need and so concerned with your pain and your sin that He came exclusively for you. And I don't know how God does that. It takes God to get that done. But He's done that for me, and He's done that for you, and He's done that for every man. And yet it still isn't a massive thing. It's still that individual, that I am the beloved of God. And that there's never been a moment, wouldn't it be something to have Jesus come and say, there's never been a moment that He's not been the object of my love. He's constantly receiving my affection. He's constantly receiving the undergirding of my love. Have you been experiencing that? It's true, friend. It's true. Well, I haven't been what I ought to be. Doesn't matter. Hey, well, I haven't meant that. No. Well, but yeah, I haven't earned that. No, you don't earn this, man. Well, I haven't performed. No, this is not based upon a performance. I'm telling you, you are the object of the love of God, and that God Himself is saying, "This is I'm buying into this boy. He's the object of my love." Wow, what a statement! Look at the strength of these words. Look at the rest of it. This is my beloved Son. Oh, son. That's all about intimate relationship, isn't it? See, sonship as about, oh, He's mine, which is my beloved Son. See, it's all in a flow. See, sonship has to do with, oh, I'm producing Him. Sonship has to do with, hey, He has my genes in Him, brother. Hey, He has my chromosomes, man. He has my DNA in Him, brother. He's identified with me. He has the shape of my nose. He looks like me. Hey, this boy here thinks like I do, man. Yeah. Why? Because we're intimate, man. We're intimate. We're of the same livestock. We belong together. Hey, He's my Son. This is my beloved Son. Can you imagine the thrust of that upon the life of Jesus as He heard the Father say it, and His heart began to beat fast in the midst of the squabble and argument He had with His disciples? He was being clued in. He was being confirmed by the very essence of the Father Himself. And the Father is saying, hey, I'm buying into you, Jesus. Everything that's going on, you're talking about the style of the cross, and I want you to know I'm buying into that, man. Hey, that's my heart. That's my nature. I buy in 100% to that. Yes, sir. Hey, what you've got to say about it is 100% dead on, man, because I'm saying it through you. You've been in my mind. You know my thought process, and out of your lips are coming my words, so I'm buying in. And Jesus, you are the object of my love. I'm concentrating every bit of my love on you 24 hours a day, moment by moment, so stick with it, Jesus. You are my son. Hey, you are the product of my loins. You come from my seed. You have my DNA in you, man. You have my nature flowing in and through you. You have my life permeating, pulsating in your system. Hey, Jesus, you're dead on, man. You are dead on. Stick with it. The style of the cross is the way to go. Man, I want that for my life. I'm telling you. I want Jesus to come and say, oh, Manly, you are mine. I'm buying into you, boy. Hey, everything that's coming out of your life, I'm taking ownership of it, man. I'm saying it's mine. And when you minister on, that's my ministry coming out of you. Because I'm producing you, and you're the object of my love, and 24 hours a day I'm undergirding you with the power of my love and with the flow of my spirit. And hey, rest in my love, man. Know that you're loved. Don't ever feel lonely again, boy. Hey, because I'm surrounding you. I'm penetrating you. I'm all over you, man. You're the beloved. You're the object of my love, and you're my son. You have my DNA in you. I'm producing you. You're born of me, boy. Hey, you are the extension of my life. You're the bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. Hey, you and I are one, man. Your life and my life are intimately connected. We're joined at the hip. You and I are tight, man. You and me, you're my beloved son. Man, I want that. Jesus, give me that in the depth of all that can be in my life. Oh, look on. This is my beloved son, in whom I am well pleased. Well pleased. Oh, it's the total stamp of approval. The total stamp of approval has been placed upon Jesus. Can you imagine it? The total stamp of approval. And Jesus has the stamp of he's okay. What's happening in him is okay. And oh, we've already talked about it extensively, but think about it. Think about it being well-pleasing to the Father. Everything Jesus did, when the Pharisees are all bent out of shape because he broke their little Sabbath day law, the Father's saying, yay, Jesus, go for it, man. You did good. You did good. When Martha and Mary are all upset because Jesus didn't come on time, and Lazarus is dead and been dead 4 days, and they think it's too late. The Father's saying, yay, Jesus, whoa, you did the right thing. Hey, hang in there. When the disciples are all upset and demanding that Jesus choose one of them to be number one in the kingdom, the Father's saying, yay, Jesus, glad you didn't choose, because this is not about choosing positions anyway. Good for you, Jesus. Hey, the Father is pleased. When others are all bent out of shape, yay, the Father's saying, yay, good for you, Jesus, good for you. Stick with it, boy. When the disciples are rebuking him about the style of the cross, what's happening here? The Father's coming down, man. The Father's coming down saying, hey, Jesus, yay for you, boy. Yay for you. Stick with it. Stick with it, man. Hey, don't you budge on this. Hey, it's the style of the cross. It's the only chance you've got to redeem a world. It's the reason you came to this world. Bleed, suffer, and die. Pour your life out, man. Give yourself up. And Jesus, be hard on them. Call them into that. Don't let them get by, Jesus. Don't let them get by. Don't let those disciples think there's one standard for you and another for them. Don't let them for one single moment slip into comfort and using the gospel and the kingdom for their own ends. Come on, Jesus. Call them to the cross. Look them in the eye and tell them to deny themselves and take up their cross and follow you. Jesus, come on. Tell them strong, loud, and clear that if they seek to save their life, they'll lose it. If they lose their life for your sake, they'll find it. Tell them the fundamental of the kingdom, because it's the only chance they've got to get in, and it's the only chance they've got to win their world. Call them, Jesus, to the fundamentals of the kingdom of God, the cross and its style. Don't budge on this, Jesus. You are my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Yay, Jesus, you're dead on. I'd support you 100 times over. 100 times over. And listen, you disciples, and there comes the climactic statement. Hear him. Hear him. Shut up and listen to him. Hear him. Hey, you disciples, hear him. Listen to what He's got to say to you. For He's my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. He's the one that's opened Himself to me. I'm the one who's demonstrating myself through Him. What's happening in and through Him is me. He's showing you Him. He's showing you myself. Hey, the visibility of the invisible God is taking place here. You're learning the heart of God. Come on, disciples. Open your ears. Open your eyes. Open your mind. Hey, grab the truth. Be expanded. He's telling you the truth, guys. He's a bleeding, suffering, dying Messiah, because I'm a bleeding, suffering, dying kind of God, and the kingdom of God has as its foundation point the lose your life, give yourself up, never ever live for yourself. The Father comes down and confirms it. He's confirmed it in your life. So are you going to buy in? Are you going to give yourself to it? Will you be available for His action through you?